Deontology is defined from the Greek word deon, which means duty. And again, to use my terrible joke, it is not howdy doody or doggy duty, but obligations. And so if one is a deontologist, you would hold that what makes actions right or wrong is sort of intrinsic to the action. And so this makes it rather different from the consequentialist position that we saw in utilitarianism. For the utilitarian, the idea is that it's the consequences that matter. So if utilitarian, put a bumper sticker on their car and they were nice, it would say the greatest good for the greatest number. For a deontologist, if they had a bumper sticker on their car, it would say obey the correct rules. Because they're not just about obedience, they're about following the correct rules. Now, probably the most common and best known form of deontology is the rule deontological view. And there are others that are not rule deontological, but we'll focus on rule deontology because it's kind of the best known. And not surprisingly, it's a rule-following position. So suppose you're trying to figure out what to do and you want to be a deontologist, or you want to give deontology a try. So what you do is this. You take the action you want to do and you would match it up against what you regard as the correct moral rules. And if it violates these rules, it's against the rules, it's wrong morally. If it matches the correct moral rules, it's right. And if the rules say nothing about it, then it would be neutral. And so the actions themselves have intrinsic value. Simply taking the action would make it good or bad. So what do deontologists have to do in terms of laying out their theory? Well, the most obvious thing is they have to provide the correct rules. One way to do this, kind of the classic way, is having a list of rules, a rule book. One example would be, looking at religious ethics, would be the Bible. The Bible has, the classic 10 Commandments, don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat, don't get caught, that sort of stuff. And so if you happen to base your deontology on religion, and you were Christian, you'd use the Bible. You'd go through and that would be your rule book. And of course you could have many other forms of deontology where you have different rule sets. You can alternatively, if you don't want to have a list, because one obvious problem with lists is there's always new stuff that keeps arising. So to use my usual example, if you're asked, what does the Bible say about, say, genetic engineering or stem cell research or the use of drones or privacy in the context of social media? And the answer is, well, nothing. It says nothing about those directly. Now, you can always do interpretations. You could go through and say, okay, this applies to drones, this applies to stem cell research. But the challenge is when you have new stuff, you kind of need new rules and new interpretations. And so some thinkers have rule-generating systems, like our good dead friend Immanuel Kant. He has a rule-making, mechanism, a categorical imperative. There's also this fellow Ross, a famous philosopher, and again, being famous in philosophy is like not being famous at all. And he believed, with great faith in people, that people who are thoughtful and well-educated would find these rules through intuition. And of course, there's the obvious problem of, well, how do you decide who is thoughtful, and why just the well-educated, and why think that their rules would just be correct? Now, Kant also agreed that the rules would be found through reason, but they would be, discovered. Ross also held, like Kant did, that the rules are objective and can be overridden. So he would take an objective view, but one rule could override another. I mean, to use an analogy, like in the rules of a game, well, baseball or Dungeons and Dragons or whatever, you can have rules that override other rules. So the rule applies, except when this happens. Kant, in contrast, was an absolutist. So he did accept, obviously, that rules are objective, but he accepted there's no exceptions. So putting him in our spectrum of morality, he would be an absolutist. And again, famous Deontologists include obviously Immanuel Kant, Ross, Rawls, and from a religious standpoint, I guess Moses would be, the whole Ten Commandment thing, because he would be a rule deontologist. So why do people like deontology? Well, there are a variety of reasons. One, being a rule-based theory, it does seem to provide clear and definite answers. And if you embrace absolutism, then there's no gray. So some people find that very appealing. It also provides clear guides for action in the form of rules. I mean, people are accustomed to following rules, both in terms of like the law, also in terms of like games, be they, sports like baseball, games like chess, more complicated games like, Dungeons and Dragons, video games, etc. And they all have rule systems. And so people are accustomed to it, and they're also quite familiar with law. The theory also has, much like utilitarianism does as well, matches our moral intuitions in some cases. Because as we saw, as we'll see, there are battling intuitions. Again, going back to, we can use like a trolley style example. Suppose, we'll change it to a plane crash example. Suppose you go to medical school and you go through and you're doing an internship on you're lucky you're doing it on some wonderful tropical vacation island, and you're one of the few doctors there, but there's a conference on the mainland, and the other doctors say, hey, we're going to the conference, you're the new person, you get to stay here. Of course nothing's going to happen. But if you've seen movies where people leave and they say nothing's going to happen, of course something happens. So imagine a plane flying to the island crashes, and there are 5 survivors. Now, in this case, if you know from medical experience that you could save one person who's really badly injured, but the other 4 will die, or you can save the 4 and the 1 dies, well, these people literally fell out of the sky, you don't know who they are, you would save the 4 people, because 4 is more than 1. But of course, things would change if, say, you knew these people. Say, for example, the most badly injured person was your husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, or relative, someone really important to you. In that case, the utility might not matter. You might decide instead to follow the rule that you help the people closest to you first. Or to use another example, imagine a plane crash occurs and you need blood and organs to save these people, and just so happens that a hermit lives on the island, has come in for their yearly checkup. You're the one who knows they're there because you're the only one they trust, and maybe they did some shady stuff before coming to this island. You're not entirely sure though, but no one would miss them. And so you could just say, oh, you need your shot. You give them a little shot, they fall asleep. You take all their blood, their organs, and save those people. So you sacrifice one person to save many. But in that case, our intuition would go against utilitarianism. We would probably want to say that is just wrong. And so if you have kind of thoughts, feelings that some things are just wrong, you shouldn't do, even if there's, allegedly good consequences, you might be a deontologist. There are other options as well, but that's kind of the common distinction between the two. Now we'll then move on to our good dead friend Immanuel Kant again, talking about his moral theory.